He can't talk, so we're gonna do most of the talking this time. We had our 6th kid. We're gonna share some of the fun parts about how he arrived.
He came, it was about 2 weeks ago. I was 37 weeks and 3 or 4 days along, which is right in line with when all of my other kids have come. They've always come in week 37. Riggs came at 35 weeks and a couple of days. So we were prepared to go earlier if needed, but he came at technically full term, which is good because it was less of a stay in the hospital, and he's healthy and he was big. He was 8 pounds 8 ounces when he was born, which is my biggest baby. So I'm glad I didn't go all the way to 40 weeks because he would have been a 10-pound baby.
We had a little fun with the kids and we took some wagers when it was kind of getting close, like closest to the pin. Okay, guess what day and time Mom's gonna have this baby, and whoever's closest will get a little prize.
So we all did these guesses. I did a guess. I mean, I'm the one who's feeling all of the pre-labor stuff, and my date had passed twice. So even I was wrong on this. I was telling the kids, I can tell I'm getting close because I have a lot of the prodromal labor when I am getting close. So I'll have contractions at night, and then by morning they fizzle out and nothing happens during the day. And usually that happens for several days leading up to being in active labor. And that is kind of what had happened, except for with Bear, he was positioned properly. Riggs was not. So my contractions with Riggs were excruciating even in the very beginning stages. And with him, they were not bad at all. It was almost like a Braxton Hicks contraction where it just wasn't painful. I knew that they were getting more intense as time went along because in consecutive nights I would start to wake up with the contraction, but I knew if I could sleep through them, then it wasn't the real deal. So I would try and go back to bed, and every night I was able to sleep through all the contractions that came. So
then the best part was when she finally realized she was ready. It was middle of the day.
Yes.
And we had butchered a batch of chickens the day before. And so I was like, oh, we got some time. Let me bring these to the house and get them ready to like put in the freezer, okay? And so I've got chicken all over my hands and stuff. I'm not like hospital ready. And then Becky's like, as kindly but urgently as possible, she's like, we need to go or something. And so I'm like, okay, well, let me hurry and clean up and get ready to go. And then she gets more urgent, and I'm like, I can't leave with chicken stuff on my hands. Like, let me finish this and then we'll go. So,
yeah, and I was super worried because I was like, I'm gonna have the baby in the car at this point.
We worry about that because she was so close to having Noelle in the car, or was it Kian?
Both.
Okay, both of them in the car. So
I had 2 babies where I went to the hospital, and within probably 10 minutes of arriving at the hospital,
we were holding a baby. Yeah.
So it was extremely close to not making it in time. And so I was very nervous that we wouldn't make it to the hospital in time. And I should probably explain, like, I think a lot of people assume with like homesteading and all of that stuff that we would do a home birth. I'm not against home births at all. It's just the main overarching reason why I've never done that is because of anxiety. It just makes my anxiety go crazy. And so I'm actually more comfortable at the hospital than I would be at home. And the second reason is because I give borderline premature babies. So that's like another reason, but they've all been healthy at birth and have never had to go to NICU or anything like that. We knew we were going to the hospital. That was important to me.
We mentioned Noelle and Kian were both very quick births. They were so fast, the doctor didn't even get there in time. So the nurses essentially delivered the babies. And so that's that. And so I'm still upset that we had to pay for a doctor's bill even though he wasn't there, but that's another story.
That was the background that we had before I was in active labor with Bear here. The day that I woke up, Friday, I was just really sore, really tired. I had gone through all of these nights of labor pains and I was just ready to have the baby. And I was like, we need to have this baby today. I'm done. I want to have the baby. And I knew that my body was preparing itself anyway, so I could kind of help it along. So I went out to the garden. I actually recorded some of that.
Oh, okay.
So I can put that in here. It's the middle of January. I'm going to start some more seeds in soil blocks, mostly flowers right now. I'm trying to do some work out here so that I can get this baby to come. Kind of feels like I'm in labor, but I'm not 100% sure yet. I get a lot of the false labor, so sometimes it's really hard to tell. So hopefully with some activity here, we can get this baby to come soon. There was a point there where I was waiting and I had to like sit down because the contraction was so intense. And I was like, I think I'm in active labor now. I think this is the real thing now. I just need to keep it going. So I walked in the house about 3 o'clock after waiting. That's when I told Cam, I think this is the real deal. He recounts back to me that I didn't really tell him that we needed to go, which is, this is kind of around the time you walked outside. I think you went and got all the chickens from, because we had butchered the chickens in our high tunnel. We had them out in a cooler out there. It had been a couple of days and we really needed to get them packaged and put away.
Yeah.
And
yeah, so I was doing it.
So he was doing it. He was doing a good job. He had stayed home from work that day, which was good.
Yeah.
Too, because he had stayed home Thursday and he was staying home Friday, kind of working from home, but also being ready to go.
Yeah.
And so he brought the chickens in. When I saw him with the buckets of chickens, by the time he was back in the house, it was probably 3:30 by then. And I was like, what are you doing? Like, we need to go right now. I could tell like it was time to go. So he hurried and got the rest of the chickens in the cooler and put it on the deck instead of being in the high tunnel. So it was a cooler place, and luckily I think it was getting cold. It was gonna get cold again that night. So they were okay being outside on the deck while we ran to the hospital. Yeah. Yeah, we contacted a friend to come and watch Riggs because my sister was supposed to come, but I couldn't get a hold of her right away. And so our friend came for the meantime, and she was here with Riggs and Dax. And then we were able to get a hold of my sister along on the way to the hospital. But by the time we left, it was probably like 5. Another reason why I never really know when it's time to go to the hospital or not, especially with the other babies, is I was always waiting for contractions to get closer together. My contractions don't get closer together in like increments. I'll have a contraction like 20 minutes apart, and then 1 5, and then 1 7, and 2, and 3. And they never get closer together until I am at the very, very end of labor, almost ready to push out a baby. And then they start to get really close together. What my doctor told me this time that was super helpful is she said, don't wait for your contractions to get closer together, just go off of intensity. I've had 5 babies before. I know when it's intense enough that this is the real deal. And the moment when I had to sit down in the garden, that's when I knew these are intense and we need to go in. And they got progressively more intense as we went along, even though, like usual, they were not like consistent contractions. So yeah, we were rushing to the hospital. This one I had downloaded like a Christian hypnobirthing app. I listened to that on the way. Cam called in advance and said we were on our way because we had had all these experiences where I'd been so close before, like, you guys need to be ready to come and get us. We had done a lot of paperwork beforehand that ended up being useless, completely useless, because we got there and they had us refill out everything again. We got there, they asked me some verbal questions, put me in a wheelchair, then took me up to the room, changed, and then they checked me and I was 8 centimeters dilated. So being that far along was perfect for a hospital birth because it's more comfortable to labor at the house and I can stay busy with gardening and stuff like that, so it just really distracts me. There were a lot of things that I feel like were miracles with this labor and delivery, and one of them was that we made it to the hospital in time. Yeah. That was a miracle. And I think a big part of that was that my water had not broken at that point. At this hospital, they have low intervention hospital rooms where you know in advance that the mom isn't gonna have an epidural, and they have a birthing tub. And they only have one of these rooms, and I really wanted that room. And it just so happened that we arrived and somebody was already in the low intervention room. So I did not get in the tub at all. You're allowed to labor in the tub, but you're not allowed to give birth in the tub. So she was like, you're so close, we wouldn't want you to get in the tub anyway. Which I'm like, okay. I'm in the room there, and I have like the hypnobirthing things in, and they're asking me all of these questions, and I'm like, oh, I really need to like relax and focus here. So I directed them at Cam. He answered the questions, and I was able to focus for a little bit. I have a female doctor, she has a family and stuff. I didn't realize she doesn't work on the weekends. So we had another doctor come in, and at first I was like, I'm not so sure about this doctor. He came in and he was
just street clothes and he just looked very, I don't know, like ultra casual.
Yes.
But he looked like the night shift, like third string quarterback doctor. Like, okay, we'll take you, I guess.
When he introduced himself, he was like, I'm your on-call doctor, and I've delivered somewhere between 10,000 and 12,000 babies. And I was like, okay, well, that's good. Yeah. So he was a very experienced doctor, and he was just really relaxed, which was so good for me because I am so, when I'm in labor and stuff like that, I am so uptight and I'm so nervous. And he was so relaxed about everything, which was really nice. It's kind of like Cam, like he balances me out because he's so relaxed. And I'm a little bit more like
high strung and nervous.
Yes, nervous. So like having these two people with me that were just like so relaxed, it's gonna be fine. And the doctor was awesome too. He looked at me and he's like, tell me what you want me to do. You're in charge. Just tell me, were there certain steps that you had told your doctor that you wanted her to do? And so he wrote down all of these things that I was like, I want to do the delayed cord clamping, and I want to have the baby on me, and I don't want you to take him away at first. And he's like, yeah, those are all sort of
protocol now,
customary with the hospital. And that was really nice. I'd never had a doctor do that before.
Well, he felt more personable than any other doctor you had.
The other thing that I didn't notice right away with him until as we were getting closer to me pushing and stuff, he knew I didn't want to do an epidural and I didn't want any medication. He was so excited about that. He's very into the natural side of things more than a regular doctor is. Oh, so usually they push like the epidural and getting this intervention and that intervention, and he was like, no, I know you can do this. And he was really excited that I wanted to give birth naturally. And he told us later the next day that those are his favorite kind of deliveries to do because they're so fast. When we got up to the room, it was about 5:30. After about half an hour, 45 minutes, I felt like I needed to push. So I was on the birthing ball at that point. I got on the bed and he checked and he's like, oh yeah. He's like, I can't feel your cervix at all. And
water still hadn't broken.
The water still hadn't broken.
So that was weird.
And I was like, this is really interesting. It was nice because sometimes when the water doesn't break, it acts as like a cushion. So my contractions still weren't extremely intense. He had told me earlier, he's like, I can break your water if you want, or we can just
see what happens.
Happens. And of course I'm like, I want to do this as naturally as possible. So let's just see what happens. So here I am, I'm completely dilated. My water hasn't broken. And I'm like, I feel like I need to push. He's like, well, you can push. Either your water will break or you can give birth with the baby inside the amniotic sac and it will not break. He was saying that there is like this extremely rare thing where the baby comes out with the amniotic sac not broken. And I was like, that would be sort of cool. He called it a veil birth. So I gave it probably like 2 or 3 pushes like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, I feel like I am not doing anything. Like I was pushing so hard, but I was like, I feel like the baby is just not moving. It was hard. Cam looked at the doctor and he's like, Kim asked him, would it be easier for her if you broke the water? Would it be easier for her to push the baby out? And the doctor's like, oh yeah. And I'm like, break my water right now.
Because I thought it's like pushing an inflated balloon out, and that's probably what it was like. So.
Yeah. So the doctor broke my water. As I was getting ready to push, this is where I really realized where a good doctor and a great doctor, the difference between the two.
Yeah.
And this guy was a great doctor. I had never been coached through pushing out a baby, maybe a little bit, but he was so good at describing exactly what I needed to do and how to push properly. Just that I needed to take a deep breath in, hold it, and then push, because if I was pushing without holding my breath in, then I was not getting the same amount of pressure in getting the baby out. And there was just like a lot of things like that where he was just coaching like the entire way through. And you could really tell, like, this guy has delivered 10,000 babies. He knows exactly what to do. That is why he like predicted that it would be 3 pushes, and then he was out in 2 pushes, because he just did such a good job. Even just telling me like what was coming. I had forgotten a lot of the things that happen, and he just kind of told me, he's like, when you get to this point, when the baby is crowning, you're gonna feel like you want to stop pushing, but it's so important to just keep pushing through that ring of fire pain, is what he called it.
Yeah.
And it really helped me a lot, because I experienced that and I pushed right through it. And that's part of the reason why at push number 2, I could feel it. And I was like, this baby is coming out right now. Like, I am done pushing, done with this pain. Because after the first push, he was kind of like stuck in the birth canal. That was the hardest one. That was the hardest one, because I could feel him, and there was so uncomfortable. So uncomfortable.
Well, that's the difference between a doctor that's just like, good job, you got this.
Yes.
And then what he did, like explained it and coached you through it.
And for being a guy doctor, it was almost like he knew better than a female how to coach through it. I've never had a female doctor before until this one, but she wasn't there. So I don't really know what she would have been like as far as coaching, but this doctor was so good at coaching me through the delivery, and just made me feel like really comfortable the entire time. And I was so glad about that. It was so nice. They just kind of wiped him off a little bit and put him on my chest.
For like an hour.
So I didn't know how big he was or what he weighed or any of that stuff until I was the one who called in and said, okay, I'm ready for you to take him a little bit and weigh him. So I was able to put him on me and nurse him right away. They did say I was bleeding a little bit more than usual, so they gave me Pitocin for that in an IV. The Pitocin was just constantly making me contract. It was so rough. About 45 minutes had passed, and I am just like, oh, I was just so uncomfortable in the bed. I couldn't move, and I called the nurse and I was like, turn it off. I don't want it anymore. I don't care if I bleed out or whatever. Turn it off. And so she did. She turned it off. All of a sudden, I felt a lot better. Naturally, your body does that when you nurse a baby. And so I knew I was going to be breastfeeding, and I was going to have lots of contractions anyways to stop the bleeding. And they had already had it on for a while, so I was like, I think I'm good. Yeah. And the nurse checked everything, and she's like, actually, your bleeding is normal now. So I'm like, good, because I can't handle that any longer. Yeah. So then they moved us into another room, and we were only in the hospital for 24 hours total, which was amazing, because with Riggs, we were in the hospital for 5 days because he was premature. Yeah. They had to make sure that he was able to go in the car seat, and he was just having trouble in the car seat, not breathing properly. He was healthy.
Early, so they took precaution, but he's fine.
The 24-hour thing was awesome. My nurses in the recovery room were amazing, and they also gave me some freedom to say, if you don't want us to come in the middle of the night, we won't come in. I did want them to come in. I asked for that because I like them to wake me up so that I can nurse the baby. The doctor came in the next day, And we had a long talk with him, and that was when we realized even more that he was just
He was cool.
a very good doctor. I just feel like that was such a blessing to have him as a doctor.
Yeah, it was.
Like I was missing my regular doctor because she's awesome too, but the guy who was on call, he was so good. He also encouraged me to not do any of the painkillers that they offer to you after you give birth because it's not good for you or the baby. And originally when they offered me this painkiller, they were like, oh, it's safe for mom and baby. That's what the nurses say. And the doctor came in, he's like, don't take those. He's like, he's like, I saw what you went through giving birth. He's like, you can handle the, you know, the afterbirth pains. Just take the ibuprofen and you'll be fine. Overall, it was a really good experience. We came home. It was harder when I got home this time around because last time I had had all those days in the hospital just laying down to recover. And when I got home this time, my kids...
You had 5 other kids that expect you to be mom.
Yeah, they were just like expecting me to just like hop back into my role as mom and like making food and like doing all this stuff. And I'm like, I can't do that right now. It was really hard because even of myself, I wanted to move around and do things, but I was just not ready to do that. My body wasn't ready. I could tell just by like the pain level and all that stuff that I wasn't ready to hop into normal life again. And so it was a little bit of a hard adjustment, both for me and for the kids, just telling them, hey, go to dad, because mom, I cannot do all this stuff right now. And that pretty much wraps up the story of his birth. It was a good note to end on.
6 kids is fun. I highly recommend it. Or do we?
It's fun.
Yeah.
They're great.